Welcome back to Flashpoint. Republican governors in southern states slamming the United Auto Workers' push to organize automotive factories. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster among those saying unions could lead to layoffs and fewer investments. An industry with $27 billion economic impact in the Palmetto State. Joining us now is Professor Stephen Sylvia with American University in Washington, D.C. He's also the author of the UAW's Southern Gamble, organizing workers at foreign-owned vehicle plants. Professor, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
So explain to us, why is this movement to unionize Southern auto factories? Why is it happening now?
Well, it started a long time ago, actually, that you can go back to the beginning of this century with organizing jobs, even preceding that. It started back then because the foreign plants started arriving in the South. There was a big effort about, in the 2010s, and that was unsuccessful. The reason why the latest effort is happening is largely because of the success that the UAW had with its strike last year against General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis.
And explain to us, how does it play into the fact that both Carolinas are right-to-work states, many of the southern states are right-to-work states? How does that, and basically for those who don't know, that means that can't force a worker to join a union. How does that factor into this calculus?
As far as organizing, it really doesn't. It's more of a symbolic statement that the state governments have expressed an opinion on making it harder for unions once they're in place. But as far as the organizing drive, being right to work doesn't really affect the drive. In some ways, it makes it a little easier for the union, because the union can claim, well, even if we win, you don't have to be a member. But the drawback for unions is if they win, then they don't collect dues from all the workers. They only collect dues from workers who would like to be members.
This is all part of a big push by the UAW to target 13 automakers. What's the likelihood that you think we could start to actually see more unions popping up in some of the southern states?
Well, one thing that's worth noting is the UAW does have plants that it is organized in southern states. It has organized Ford plants, General Motors plants, and also in the Charlotte area, for example, Freightliner and Thomas Built buses have been organized by the UAW, and those are owned by Daimler. So the UAW has organized foreign-owned truck and bus plants, but it has not organized any car plants. So that would be a breakthrough for the union.
And so more on that, what impact do you think this could actually have on the industry if these unions do take hold here in the South?
Well, from the perspective of the UAW, having a lot of southern plants, none of which are unionized, puts a bit of a damper on their efforts when they negotiate with the domestic producers, because Ford and General Motors negotiators say, well, the wages that are paid at Hyundai, at Volkswagen, at Nissan are lower than your contract. So if we're going to be successful in the marketplace, we can't have your wages at our plants drift too far above the wages in those other plants.
And for workers specifically, how does this benefit them, or how does this impact them?
Well, in a couple of ways. One, they would end up with higher wages and benefits. That you can look empirically, and that's the case, that the workers would end up with higher wages and benefits. A second thing, in these plants, there are some long-standing issues that the workers have wanted addressed, and they haven't made a lot of progress on them. In the Chattanooga plant, for example, they've been very concerned with the rules around paid time off, that they're very restrictive, and they would like to have them be a little more flexible. And they've tried for years, they've talked to management, and they haven't succeeded. And so a lot of the people who are supporting unionization in Chattanooga they're saying, you know, the one thing we really want is to have more flexibility around paid time off. So the union gives them an opportunity, gives them a little more leverage when they're talking to management to make progress in those areas where they haven't succeeded in the past.
The UAW came out and supported President Biden. How much of this do you think for families or these workers, on the family level or the individual level, how much do you think that labor membership is a political issue rather than just say an issue of what's best for them and their family or what's best for the companies?
Well, you know, I found particularly in southern states that the workers tend to focus on what's best for them and their company. The political side of things really seems to be secondary.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think geographically it's different, say, in the South than in other places?
That's a good point. I don't think it's all that different in the North. That generally, when workers decide to unionize, it's because of what's going on in the plant. It's not because of who's president.
So we talked about, you started talking about how this has been ongoing now for years and years and years, and this is just the newest front. So where do you see this battle going next?
Well, the UAW has already filed for a recognition election at the Mercedes plant in Vance, Alabama. So that should take place in a little less than a month, and that's where it would go next. And after that, I think the results will determine what happens. That if the UAW is successful, it will most likely redouble its efforts and it would have to make a choice on where to focus next. The plants where they've had the most success so far have been, besides the German ones, have been a Toyota plant in Missouri and a Hyundai plant in Georgia. And so it's likely they'll look at those. They'll probably consider perhaps looking at the third German company, BMW, who has the plant in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Yes, yes, yes. Seeing a potential shift of things here in the South. All right, Professor Stephen Sylvia with American University. Professor, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
More Flashpoint after this.